Hello, everyone, and welcome to the DM show. Thank you for joining us. And hello, Martin. How are you?
Good, good. Hi, Deirdre. I'm not where I usually am. I'm actually,
Yes, different background.
yeah, different background, different place. I'm at the University of Guelph's Arboretum for a conference on communications. I'm going to be doing a
Excellent.
panel on AI right after the show, pretty much. So I'm hoping to take away a few things from what we talk about today.
Yes, and there's a lot to talk about with
Oh, yeah,
AI and decision making. But
definitely,
before
definitely.
before we get to bringing Michael Meath on, anything to chat about, Martin? Anything going on, or what
No,
everybody can expect?
No, nothing really new. Just kind of looking out at a forest, really, with the sun streaming, and I'm not used to it. So if I look off in the distance, you'll know why.
All right. Well, let's not take any further time. Michael Meath is joining us today. And Michael is a friend and a colleague. He has spent over 40 years being a strategic advisor to healthcare, financial services, and tech CEOs, helping them to navigate reputational issues and crises. Michael is also the founder of Fallingbrook Associates, and he's a professor at the Syracuse University Newhouse School of Communications. I think everybody should connect with Michael on LinkedIn to learn more about him, but we're going to bring him into the broadcast, so hang on. Hello, Michael.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. How are you?
Good. Great to see you. And where are you coming in from?
Well, I'm in Lewis, Delaware. So while I don't have your view, Martin, of the forest, and I'm glad you told me, so when I see you looking off into the distance, it won't just be because of the topic.
No.
But I'm just a couple miles from the ocean. So it's
Nice. Good
pretty
place to
nice.
be.
Yeah.
Yeah, really nice. And so, welcome. And for anyone who doesn't know this, I actually met Michael at McMaster's Master of Communications program back when it was the McMaster Syracuse MCM. And Michael, we realized early on we shared a common background in the agency world. But I met Michael, you were my professor first. And so I learned all about ethics from you. And in
Those roles have reversed, my
no,
friend.
not
Yeah,
true.
very
I'm
much.
no, I'm still learning a ton. So we want to welcome everyone who is watching us, and Ray is here. So
Hello, Ray.
welcome, Ray. Please add your name to the comments and tell us where you're from, just to say hello. And if you have any questions for Michael or comments, share them in the comments, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Yes. So let's kick it off. I mean, maybe we should talk about the difference between ethics and morals,
Yeah.
because I'm not sure everybody knows the difference. So Michael, maybe you can weigh in there. Are they the same? Or are they different?
Sure, Deirdre. Thank you. That is a great way to start. I think a lot of people think that when we use the word morals or ethics that we're talking about the same thing. And while they're very similar and they relate to one another, they're actually pretty different. And the simplest way to say it is that morals are what we think is right or wrong. And we gain all that from all the way back from our earliest ages as we are brought up in our family and our social circumstances and whatnot. And we determine, and I always like to say when I talk to anybody about ethics, whether it's a business transaction, a client that I'm working with or working with students, that I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong. I have enough trouble figuring that out for myself. So morals is what we think is right or wrong. Ethics, in essence, is what we do about it, the action that we take. And quite often, the simplest way to describe that is the systems that we use. And that's why I like the topic of ethics, and I like to teach it, and I like to use it with my clients. And once I learned all this, and it wasn't that I didn't know these terms. I was actually a theology major my first few years in college, but I never really thought about ethics in the business setting until about 15 or 20 years ago. And when I started studying it and then started teaching it, I decided that I was going to apply it in everything I did with my business clients. And we'll certainly get into some of that.
Yes.
So it's really interesting because you're saying that ethics in a way is more action based than morals, but not really, because there's cases where you have to. One of the things that you said, Michael, when you taught the course, but also that you've said many times when I've heard you speak, is that when you have a tough decision to make, you need to hit the pause button. So can you talk a little bit about what you mean by that?
Sure. And it was interesting. I actually, I got the pause button idea from the crisis work that I had done for so many years. This idea that when something happens, rather than jumping to confusion, as my father used to say, that what we need to do is take that critical 10, those first couple of moments to kind of get our head together. So in ethics, if you've got it, and we talk about, you mentioned a tough decision, Martin, but actually this applies to even the little decisions. Our emotions tend to take the better of us sometimes. And so the idea of hitting the pause button is to begin to take a step back from our intuition. There's nothing wrong with our intuition. In fact, I always like to say that after you go through everything that I'm going to talk about, you might make the same exact decision that you were going to make anyway. But what it does is it helps to verify that. It helps to confirm it. And by taking the emotion out, we're not simply relying on our intuition. We're actually trying to add a little bit more rationality to it. That's the whole point.
Yes, I would even add, Michael, that hitting that pause button, which I think is critical, also adding in some breathing as you pause. So just to, because it is about emotion, and you can let your emotion get away from you if you're not breathing properly and staying calm.
That's a great point, Deirdre. I know a lot of what you teach and the work you do has to do with how we present ourselves. And in the context of, even if you're in front of a group and a situation gets put in front of you, and we've certainly all been in that situation.
Yes.
That if we can help to control our breathing, I'm a pilot, and a lot of the training that I go through on a recurring basis is what to do when the plane isn't going to work anymore, when the power goes out, when you lose certain controls, when the radios come out, or if you lose contact with air traffic control. And so this idea of taking a breath and getting centered just helps you to make better decisions.
Yes, I didn't know you were a pilot, Michael. That's really cool.
Thanks.
Yeah. Before we get to our next question, I just want to welcome a few people. So Ray, we said, from New Jersey, Daniel from Dublin, Naman from India, Sherry Lynn from Ottawa, hello, and Sanjit Thumar, hopefully I pronounced that right, who has a question that we'll get to in a second because it's a complicated question. But Deirdre, over to you first, because I think we need a few minutes before we get into that one.
Yeah. So Michael, and I remember you did a little bit in my book. You talked about different concepts when it comes to ethics. And one of them was the concept of teleological ethics. Maybe you could talk about what teleological ethics are and what you do when you're faced with a tough decision.
Sure. If you don't mind, before that, I'd like to just drop 3 more words in that are a whole lot easier to pronounce. I always tell people that when we consider ethics and we consider decision making, that there's 3 words that we really should keep in mind: considerations, consequences, and obligations. Those are the things that really put a guard around or a frame around what it is we're going to need to decide. Considerations might be, for example, you had asked me, and as we were preparing for this, did I have any examples of companies? And imagine a fresh fruits and vegetables distribution company who posts everywhere, and they supply grocery stores all over the East Coast of the United States. And they constantly tell everybody, just as your grocery store do, your packaging says that you need to wash fresh fruits and vegetables just to get the last of that pesticides off, because they're all washed before you get them. They're almost like huge car washes. So I had a client once who had truckloads of this stuff that didn't get washed properly. And their decision was, did they need to do something about it? Did they need to recall all the product and lose millions of dollars? Did they need to contact all the grocery store chains and do something different with them, et cetera, et cetera? And so if you think about considerations, the considerations were the potential loss to the company, the potential harm to the person that might ingest it, the potential liability that even grocery stores could have incurred. Considerations. And I always, when I teach a class, Martin will remember this, when I teach a class on ethics, we talk about considerations, I always pull the wallet out of my back pocket and throw it up into the class and say, you're the CEO. What are some of your considerations? And money usually is surrounding most of them.
Yeah.
Consequences, what's going to happen as a result of our decision, good or bad? And then obligations, what kind of duties do I have and promises do I have to others that I need to keep in mind as I make a decision? So now, with those three words as a backdrop, teleological is one of the two major kind of mindsets on how we approach decision making. Teleological really could be translated into meaning consequences. And it really has to do with a guy named John Stuart Mills back in the 1800s, where he said that we're going to make a lot of our decisions based on trying to find the greatest good for the greatest number of people, right? The ultimate kind of compromise. It's how government is supposed to work. This idea that what's the best decision for the most people? And that would be considered a utilitarianism decision. A utility decision might mean that in certain circumstances, I'm going to need to make the best decision for myself or my company. And that doesn't make me selfish in and of itself. We have to be careful of it, but it does not mean that it's a bad decision just because I'm making it for myself. We do that all the time. If you're sick and you determine that you shouldn't go to work or be in a large group of people or make that presentation, that sounds like a utility decision, and it is, and that's okay. Both of those are teleological decisions. They're based on consequences. What's the outcome going to be?
So I think you've explained that really well, Michael, because it's tough to get this around your head. There's another form of decision making, again, based on philosophy, that's called deontological. So you have teleological, which is consequential, based on consequences. Can you tell us a little bit about deontological decision making?
Sure. And I'm sure that, a third of your audience is already saying, oh, come on, are we going to get off all this philosophical talk? And we will. But these are good kind of foundation blocks to put down. A deontological decision, which really came from the work of Immanuel Kant, also back in the 1800s, is this idea that oftentimes we make decisions based on a sense of duty, an obligation that we have. And an easy way to remember, if you're trying to remember the difference between teleological and deontological, because they are both a mouthful. I mentioned you earlier, my wife just calls it that logical stuff. Deontological, just remember the letter D. D equals duty.
Duty.
And that's really what a deontological decision is. And it means when you consider the situation that I'm dealing with, do I have a duty, an obligation that I need to meet, or that I at least need to put into the hopper of consideration as I'm making that decision?
Okay, so sorry, Deirdre, why don't we go to our first question from sorry, I'm going to not pronounce it.
I think it's Sajith Kumar.
Yeah. The sun's coming into my eyes, so I can barely see my screen. Is the AI bubble a speculative mirage or a transformative crucible? If the concern is real, how should individuals and institutions ethically evaluate their participation? And if the bubble doesn't burst, what new responsibilities emerge in a world where hype in essence becomes infrastructure? And that is a fantastic question, or several questions in one.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, we're out of time.
Yeah.
That's a great question. And let me try to answer it, or begin to answer it this way. First of all, AI in its simplest form, and this is where I'm on dangerous territory with Martin in the room, has actually been around a long time. I did a study and in a course that I taught recently for the Newhouse School. I looked all the way back to the year 1100 and found examples of where we were trying to use technologies to do things, play musical instruments, form words, do things that we were doing on our own previously without the help of a machine. So AI, whether it's adaptive cruise control, the Alexa machine that's in my kitchen on the countertop, AI has been around, and now we're just going through the motions and the exponential growth in technology that's taking us to higher and higher and higher levels. So into that whole generative area. The decisions that we make around even the most basic forms of AI that a Luddite like me uses are the same kinds of decisions that I would make whether the technology was there or not. I can still use considerations, consequences, and obligations. I can still use the pause button to a certain degree, recognizing full well that AI speeds everything up. I can still use deontological and teleological decision making on what I'm going to do with that technology. And hopefully, as we consider all of that, we're able to, as all of these various forms, whether it's Claude or Gemini or Copilot or Pi or all of them, as they're racing towards how to make things better, faster, and spend all the money on this, hopefully the individual companies, and then hopefully to a certain degree, government will put the right kind of guardrails in to help make some of the better decisions that we've got to make so that things don't run away from us too far. To that extent, I think that the responsibilities that we've got are the same responsibilities we had before. They are a little more complicated because of this exponential technological growth, but the institutions that we're going to use to evaluate them and how we participate in them, I think can be the same ones that we used previously. We just have to be we have to be fluent. I mentioned to both of you before we came on the air that I had to kind of say to myself, okay, I'm a 69-year-old man and I gotta really get back into all this and understand it. And I was not wanting to do that. But by doing it, and the more I look at it, I tend to be a realist, not a pessimist about how this technology will be used and how we can use it. There'll always be the bad guys, and the bad guys are going to find ways to use this technology. But I'm really encouraged to say that I think people generally are looking to ask the right questions. We don't have the answers yet on how to use this in a way that is best for society so that we're making the best right decision. And you'll notice I'm saying they're not ethically, because ethically means what do I do with it? And that's kind of up to us.
Right. Michael, do you think organizations are putting enough into the training of their employees when they're making decisions around what AI to use, and no matter how they're participating? What do you think
Absolutely
about
not.
training?
No way. Nope, they're not.
Not there yet.
And that's not to be critical of either the organizations that are developing the technology or those of us that are trying to utilize it. I just think that because this change is coming so quickly, it's hard to keep up. I mentioned earlier that there's a newsletter called The Neuron. It's a free newsletter. If you've not heard of it, you ought to check it out, especially if you're interested in all things AI. And every day they list 5, 8, 10, 12 new tools that you can use. Some of them are free, some of them you need to pay for. And it's exhausting. But we do need to keep up with that stuff. And we do need to hit the pause button even in our training and our understanding of this stuff so that we're not getting out over our skis too far as we're using these tools.
Thank you. I think there's a follow-up question.
There is from Sajis Kumar. Sorry, I can pronounce it now because I can see it. And that is, while we're chasing speed and money, is ethics going to take a back seat because of the pace of development, because of the pace of organizations not wanting to feel like they've been left behind?
Yeah, it could. It could take a back seat. And certainly, and I always am really careful, especially when I'm talking in a public forum, about the politics side of this. But we can look many places and say that sometimes the decision making that we have, which is all about, by the way, the whole point of ethics and the discussion of ethics is to get to fairness and to have trust. Because if you and I do business with one another and we don't have this basic level of trust, business will grind to a halt. And not only will business, but the relationships surrounding that. So I'm optimistic that we can figure out the right way to handle this. But I think to the question, Sajith Kumar, I think we have to be careful because we could leave ethics behind, and we need to keep it forefront. And as I listen to Sam Altman, as I listen to some of the other people that are in the forefront of this, I think they're mindful of that. Things are racing ahead of them. And that's why the more of us that understand ethical decision making, I'm no AI expert, never, ever will claim to be an AI expert, but I have a pretty good sense of how to make better decisions. And if we can apply that thinking in any technology, including AI, I think then all of us will make better decisions with it.
I agree. Do you have an example, Michael, of maybe a company that's used a framework, whether it's duty-based or consequences?
Sure. Well, we could go back to our fresh fruits and vegetables example. And that organization contacted health department, contacted, the state divisions of agriculture and said, what do we need to do in this situation? We think that our spray washers were down and did not adequately rinse these products before they got to the Piggly Wigglies, the Wegmans, the Safeway markets, and those are just examples on the East Coast. And the health department basically said, well, the packaging's already labeled, so you don't have to do anything. Now, what's interesting about this, Deirdre, is that ethic decisions, where we're talking about this decision-making process, I always want to be really clear that we're not talking about legal issues, because legal, what the law says we need to do. But where we get to apply this decision-making process is when the law is not really clear on what we got to do, or it's silent. And so in this case, this distribution company thought, do we say something? Do we not? Health Department, Department of Agriculture is telling us, you don't have to say anything. Packaging's already labeled. But yet they felt a sense of obligation. So from a duty standpoint, this company felt that they needed to inform all of those grocery store chains, suggest that more specific and kind of broadcasted messaging be put out to remind people of what they are already told. And that is, when you buy a package of strawberries, you should really wash them before you eat them. So there's an example of duty. Probably an example of a teleological decision could be where I had a client once, had an underperforming employee who was, when I say underperforming, from a sales standpoint, they were bringing in more money than anybody in the whole corporation. They actually, their earnings were more than the president of the corporation. They were that good. And they had set up a compensation package that the president of the company and the leadership were good with that. They're okay with a high-performing salesperson to make more. However, this person was not just abusive to others, was not a team player, was not was bending the rules, not breaking them, but bending the rules a bit. And so that organization And you can even apply these decision-making tools to HR issues sometimes. And I find myself in situations guiding and helping organizations to do that. So the decision process they ended up going through was to use a utilitarianism approach, because what's the greatest good for the greatest number? And this organization, ultimately, where the buck stopped with this CEO, she had to decide, is it better for my organization to have one high-performing employee who's blowing the numbers away but demoralizing everybody else, or to have everybody else feel like they're a real integral part of the team at the expense of this one person? And that's a kind of a classic utilitarianism decision.
Can I ask what she ended up doing?
She ended up getting rid of that high-performing employee after trying to put development plans in place and doing all the things.
Sure.
It also was an employment at will state, which means, for those of us that hire people, know that there are multiple states. There's only a few in the United States anyway. I don't know, Martin, I don't know how Canada works from employment at will, but I believe you've got it as well. That I technically, in most states in the US, can relieve someone of their duties for no reason whatsoever other than that I want to, so long as my contract doesn't say something differently, and that I don't discriminate based on age, based on sex, based on anything else.
I wish, I'm not an HR expert, so I don't know the answer to that. I have a feeling it might be a bit more complex here, might not be.
Okay.
But if anyone is watching and knows that answer about HR laws in Canada, just type it in the comments. Another question from Shankar, but before we get to that, Ray from Poland recently conducted a benchmark study highlighting the importance of ethical decision-making when using AI. So that's interesting. And Ray, if you'd like, please post a link to your study so we can all have a look at it. Just post it in the comments. We also have, so Shankar's question was, and this was quite an interesting one, I thought. AI technology is probabilistic. We never know what the answer is going to be, because really it's like we're throwing the dice. The machine is making predictions, although maybe there's more under the hood than that, but we're not going to get into that right now. So AI is probabilistic, but Western ethics are deterministic. How do you balance the two?
Great question, Shankar. I guess one of the ways that I would balance them, I'll go all the way to the top, when I said, if I've got a decision to make, I could use what I like to call my knee-jerk reaction and my emotion, and I could make that decision. Or I can, as you started us off with the pause button, I could take a breath, Deirdre. I could take a breath, and then based on that, think through some kind of a formula. And we can talk about some of the formulas that I use, and use that formula to do that check. At the end of that, I might say that my decision still made sense, that I thought about at the top of the situation, or that it made me pause and consider some other things, and I've changed my decision. And for that reason, I think it's possible that we can take something that's probabilistic, with all its hallucinations and everything else, and use a deterministic process, so long as we recognize that at the end of the day, and at the end of anything that I suggest we use this for, we have to also take that pause at the end and say, does that decision that I seem to have come to using this formula, does it jive with who I am? Does it make sense with the situation? And sometimes it won't. But what I do know is that if I didn't use some of these tools, and Martin, you've heard me say this 100 times, that if I didn't use these tools, that the chances of my decision being based solely on emotion is a lot higher.
Yeah.
This helps me to at least do a bit of and I'm avoiding the word gut check, because that kind of takes me back to the emotion. I'm trying to say that this allows me to sort of do a check and balance on the decision that I think I want to make anyway. And I wish I had known this stuff, thought about this stuff years ago. When I think back of some of the decisions I made in my 20s, my 30s, my 40s, I mean, one of the reasons I'm so high on this topic is because of everybody that's on this podcast, all of us. There isn't anybody who's screwed up more than I have. I've made bad decisions. I've made some bad decisions, and sometimes they're personal and I've hurt people. Sometimes they're business related. I mean, in another podcast, we can talk about the day I lost $1 million for the company I was working with in 3 hours. It happens. We are human. And so one of the reasons I'm so intrigued by this and like studying this and employing this and using it now in everything I do is that it helps to make our decisions better.
And that is a great point to end because our 30 minutes are done.
Goodness.
We went by so fast. We're going to have to get you back, Michael,
You'll have
in
to
the
come
new
back.
year to talk about the frameworks and to answer. There were a couple more questions that came in as well that we just can't get to. But, oh my gosh, we need another hour or more to talk with you. So thank you.
Sorry, I talked too much.
No, are you
No,
kidding?
it was great,
It's been
Michael.
fantastic.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
This was so helpful. And thank you to all of you who were listening. Hope you walked away with a lot of ways to see the systems and the process. And Michael, you were just great.
And we will have you back for sure to get into
we could
the
go to
frameworks
the next level.
and
Yeah. The formulas you use. That's what we want to get into.
Great.
All right. Well,
Well,
thanks,
thank you.
everybody.
See you next time.
See you next
Bye.
time. See you in December.